Today it's all about increasing sales at the farmer's market. Stay tuned for that coming up. Welcome to Grass-Fed Life. I'm your host, Diego, D-I-E-G-O. Today's episode of Grass-Fed Life is brought to you by the community of Grass-Fed Life Insiders. The Grass-Fed Life Insiders are a group who's came together to help support this show and create episodes just like you're going to hear today. In exchange for a small monthly fee, Insiders help create this content in addition to getting access to an ever-growing library of livestock-related resources. From videos to podcasts to screencasts to masterclasses, there's a lot in there. Insiders get the benefit of getting episodes of the podcast that you wouldn't hear if you weren't an insider. And that's going to be crucial. And if you really enjoy this show and you want to hear more Grass-Fed Life, pay attention here because this is the last new episode of the 2018-2019 season of Grass-Fed Life. Between now and the fall, there will be no new episodes unless you're an insider. Insiders will get new episodes. If you want to hear those, you have to sign up at grassfedlife.co/insider. Now for today's episode. Today's episode is with someone who I've known for quite a while. He's a farmer, John Smita. John's been involved in livestock production. He's been involved on the veg side of things. And most recently, his farming journey has kept him on the veg side of things. Now, while a lot of his conversation today is going to talk about veg and how he's increased sales at his veg market booth by about 300%, almost everything that he's talking about is applicable to selling meat or meat-related products at the farmer's market. It's things like booth setup, signage, customer interactions. Regardless of what you're selling, these things all matter. So pay attention in this one because John has a lot of great tips that are easy to implement, things that anybody can do, and things that everyone can implement right away. I hope this helps with your booth this season. Let's jump right into it with farmer John Smita. So John, I've known you for quite a while, going back to the initial PV1 back in 2014, and you've had a unique journey with farming, but I think there's a lot of similarities in your unique journey that other people have. Can you talk about your journey over the last few years between livestock and veg farming and where you've been and how it's gotten to you and how that's gotten you to where you are today?
I've been farming professionally for about 3 years now. I was introduced to permaculture via Jack Spirko at the Survival Podcast probably about 8 years ago. And I'd always been kind of like a healthy eater and, cared about where my food was coming from. But I started, really falling in love with the idea of homesteading. And I would say going to Permaculture Voices really kind of kicked me in the butt. It was very similar to, I felt my feeling afterwards was very similar to a spiritual, almost spiritual experience, like that I would have. Like I would go to, religious events, through my church and, getaway weekend and just walk away from the weekend feeling inspired and, walking away from Permaculture Voices. Like I felt the same thing. I was like, wow, I really have to just start doing something. And so one thing led to another, and now I've been working at Old School Farm for the last 2.5 years. I was working at a farm before that, did an internship before that. It's really gotten out of control. Here I am, an audiovisual guy by trade, and I'm getting out of the theater, which is, indoors all the time, way into the night. And now I'm getting up early in the morning and, working at the farm, and I'm just loving it. Getting some sunshine, getting some hard work done. Work hard in production, but just there's something about getting your hands dirty in the soil.
And now you're in Tennessee with the veg farm. Along the way, I know you've looked at things like rabbits and livestock, and you're at a veg farm. What are your current thoughts now between veg and livestock and how that fits where you want to go and what opportunities you have available?
That's a great question because my passion still is livestock. I saw doing the veg thing as kind of an entry point, low barrier, it's got a low barrier to entry in with getting into agriculture. Because I took Curtis's course, and I actually, the way I found myself in this job was because I started doing his thing, doing Curtis's thing. I was advertising for land and, telling people what I wanted to do. Somebody saw my advertisement. They're like, well, we've got a farm going. Can we just hire you? And I saw that as a lot lower risk. And then I moved from that farm onto this farm, the farm I'm at. Vegetables are not really my passion. I enjoy them. I enjoy, being involved with growing them, and I certainly enjoy selling them. But, and I'll say this too: if we weren't doing things on this farm the way we were doing them, I'm not quite sure that I'd be doing it. I just really enjoy Ben Hartman's mindset with production. I think Ben Hartman now. We just discovered the Lean Farm stuff about, I guess it was 2 years ago. We started implementing that at our place, but before that, of course, JM's work and Curtis's work. We were trying to bring all of that kind of stuff on the farm, and I just loved that you can do this and you can be really successful at it. It's a profession that's, looked upon as not looked upon, but, it's just known to be not a very lucrative and successful profession. And here these guys are killing it. And so I'm like, well, I like to be successful when I'm doing something, even if it's not like 100% the path that I really want to go on. We're successful at what we're doing on a farm, and that brings me a lot of joy.
When you look at what you're doing, farming part-time but mostly full-time, and then doing the AV work at a different time of day on the side, how do you view that AV work? Is it a required necessity? Is it a required necessity that you enjoy and it's fun, it's fulfilling? Or is it one of those things, it's the bitter pill that you have to swallow? Like, I have to do this to make it work right now. And if I had my druthers, I wouldn't be doing both.
Well, I think the beauty of I'm freelance and I'm doing this part-time. I think the beauty of that is I've been able to be, pretty, kind of selective. I can not do things if I don't want to. Yeah, I still enjoy it. And it is kind of weird because I feel like I'm surrounded by a lot of people who are just kind of burnt out on it. And I'm still like, hey, this is pretty cool. This is gonna be a good show. I did some work where a symphony, very recently, back in October, Halloween season, they with a symphony that played the score to A Nightmare Before Christmas while the movie was playing. And I'm like, this is awesome. And I think keeping it part-time, it just hasn't really burnt me out on it, so it really hasn't been bitter at all. I was very influenced actually by John Kitsteiner's article on his temperate climate permaculture is his website. He had an article on there talking about the myth of the perfect job and how he had gotten burnt out. I believe he was doing graphic design, and then he got burnt out on that, and then he became a doctor, and he started getting burnt out on that, and he just kind of started having this realization that, you know, there were things like very unbalanced, and there's probably should be a seasonality also to what we do, you know, which there isn't, you know, in the modern job career, you know, system. You do the same job all season long, you know, all season long. You might have differences within that season, you know, and busy times and slow times, but, you know, to kind of be I don't think we're built for, you know, 40 or 50 hours a week, 50 weeks out of the year. And yeah, you take a vacation or two, you know, maybe, you know, you take some sick time or some personal time to get some other things done.
Well, yeah, I mean, in hearing that, you know, it's interesting because you have a job that it's contract work, it's flexible work, you have a lot of optionality. And I'm hearing more and more of this from farmers, a lot of people in the AV space, nurses, people that have jobs that inherently function this way. It's not a 9 to 5 Monday through Friday like you're going to Chase Bank or you're going to go work for some big company like Google where you just show up and go through the motions. And I think for somebody who wants to dabble in the farm space and they're not quite sure of it and they maybe want to get serious about it one day, I think these types of jobs work. And I also think they work great for people like yourself who are serious about it. They do want to do it. And you have a safety net, a way to help fund that farm, a way to take some pressure off and then still enjoy it and be able to select your work around how you want to grow the farm that is going to fit best and work best for you and your location.
Oh yeah. No, that's everything you said just kind of like, yeah, spoke to, you know, has spoken to a lot of the thoughts that I've had too. Yeah. You know, something amazing that has happened since working on the farm too. Like, you know, I've been in the workforce for 20 years and it's like, wow, I'm actually pretty good at this sales stuff. Like I've always shied away and kind of been scared of it, for some reason. And even when Jack kind of inspired me to, Jack of the Survival Podcast kind of inspired me to, you know, take more of an entrepreneurial mindset. It never occurred to me that like, well, I will be a sales guy, you know, at some point, you know, in almost every entrepreneurial endeavor. And I was like, why haven't I ever considered, you know, doing AV sales? And, you know, that's actually something I've been thinking about, you know, I took the farm, you know, like, so I have to share numbers here. I'm not trying to brag, but it was like, oh, okay. So I improved the sales per market by, you know, 300 to 350%. Like, okay, that's not nothing. I've found out, you know, I found out through semi-confidential talks to the manager, like, no, we're the number one booth at this market that we just entered last year. Like, you know, there's another vendor that did better than us during tomato season, and we had a terrible tomato year. But you know, she was like, "No, John, you guys are, you know, you're one of the anchors to this market," and it was very flattering to hear, but it was also kind of eye opening. It was like, okay, so I have this gift as well, and it's actually kind of uncommon for AV guys too. A lot of AV guys are actually very similar to a lot of farmers where it's just a personality type where dealing with people isn't your favorite thing in the world. Where with me, I love dealing with people. I love the challenge of all different kinds of personality types and trying to break through to them and, engage with them.
Yeah, and I've talked to you a lot offline over the years, and I would agree. I think you're definitely a people person, and that goes a long way. If I look at the people in this space that do well at farmers markets that I know, they are all people. They're conversationalists. They enjoy the company of people. They look at the farmers market as, this is a fun way to sell my stuff. Yeah, we have to do it, but we also enjoy it because it just meshes with their personality versus, I'm at the farmer's market. I'm sitting down in a chair with my arms crossed, and we'll get into all that. But it's just funny because it's one of those things that when you go down the entrepreneurial route and you start exploring this stuff, I mean, in a way you learn who you are, and it forces you to find out who you are because you have to take on these challenges that maybe just working in the AV field never would have put you in. But now working for somebody else's farm or being your own boss as a farmer, I mean, you're wearing all the hats, you're doing all the roles, and you have to find a way to maybe not love it, but at least make it work. And it sounds like the sales side of things has really clicked for you. So can you talk to start about the farm that you are at, the basic production, what type of farm it is, to give people some idea of, okay, what were they doing first?
All right, I'll start there. I work for a farm called the Old School Farm. So, Old School Farm is a nonprofit organization with the mission of hiring people with intellectual disabilities. We provide them a means of employment, we teach them job skills, and we use all organic practices to grow our stuff. Now, if that sounded a little rehearsed, it is, and you're going to hear why a little bit later. We'll probably go over that. So our farm is run market garden style. I think I mentioned that when I started there, JM Fortier was our boss. He didn't know it. And then Ben Hartman became our boss. The farm is managed by a guy named Benjamin Brown. I believe you've met him. They brought him onto the farm, and the amount of it became a professional farm. Being tied to a nonprofit, it's kind of tough. I've worked for another nonprofit before. I've seen other nonprofits in action, and I think the best thing you could do if you want to incorporate a farm into your nonprofit is you hire a farmer. And Ben was a farmer. So the farm that does seasonal vegetables, stretched season, we stretch the seasons on the veggies with greenhouses and tunnels. We do a variety of greens all summer long, thanks to Ray Tyler and his support. So even though we're a nonprofit, we try and run that farm as profitably as possible. We don't forget the mission. We never forget the mission. But, I heard Mark Shepard once say a nonprofit without a profitable production model is going to have to become a professional begging organization. Well, we're trying to get away from that. And because of our mission, of hiring people with special needs and, disabilities, we're actually trying to shine a light to others, saying that these people can be productive members of a job team. So, now that takes a lot of work, and they need a lot of help to get there, but it's possible.
Well, I know we're talking sales, but one thing I'm curious on that you brought it up is working with adults with disabilities. How has that changed how you guys have done things on the farm? Are there examples? Because what I'm thinking of is if you have to simplify things, standardize things, that's valuable for any farm, no matter who they hire. But you guys were forced to deal with this challenge because of your mission and a very complex task might be literally not doable by somebody who had that mental challenge. And I'm thinking, was there things you had to simplify down or change that just made the farm better so you could solve this mission of helping these people?
A big deal actually is that has helped is the whole checklist task ticket. It's a godsend for our farm. It's because so now, like, they're going to go do a task and they have a checklist. Actually, before Ben was taking Connor's course, it was something I found at the market. Like, we had our supported staff. That's kind of the way we, a lot of times we refer to our, special needs, staff, our supported staff. They love checking things off. Actually, they were in charge of taking care of the CSA members, and it wasn't really necessary for them to check off, the members, but they liked doing it. Well, I'm like, well, I said to myself, look, the way we unpack and pack for market, like, is just, it's always on me. They keep coming to me. What do I do next? What do I do next? I developed this checklist for loading in and loading out. I'm sorry, setting up. That was a production term. Setting up and breaking down your booth. And it was in order how we packed the van. It was this gigantic checklist. I handed it to them. A lot of times they had job coaches that would help them, and all they did was go down the list. And packing up the van went from 35 minutes down to 25, even 20 minutes. And also, because we were packing up the van correctly, my time spent back at the farm unloading just, was probably cut in half as well. So the whole task ticket thing, it was just what this farm needed. So yeah, no matter where like you said, no matter where you are, if you special needs or not, people, there's like, why do I need a to-do list? I've done this thing a million times. Well, so it just makes your job easier on the, a million and first time, still having that checklist.
Yeah, just a mental prompt. Hey, did I forget something? There's days when something breaks on the farm, but you still got to get stuff done, or something's not happening. Hey, it's easy to forget steps. So I love the idea of that. So thinking of the van, you're moving everything to the market. You unload at the market, you set up, and John takes over for sales. And the farm is doing better in sales now with you running things at the market. Can you talk about how they were doing things at the market before you made some of the changes?
So I mentioned we do a CSA. But our goal is to sell mostly to market, our market vegetables. And let me tell you a little bit also about my history with helping them at the market. First time I helped them with the market was I was volunteering, and it was like a year and a half before I actually started working with them. I remember my first time volunteering, I didn't sit down. I also made Ben, who was assistant manager at the time, he's the manager now. I could tell he was kind of uncomfortable with the amount I was sampling, but we were also selling more than he had with this farm than he had experienced before. I would smile and talk to everybody who came relatively close to the booth. I remember specifically one woman who I gave a sample to. She said, "Oh, I could buy all of them." I took the basket of tomatoes, put it on the scale without like missing a beat, and told her that would be $20. And she took out a 20 and threw it at us. That market where I first volunteered, we had doubled the previous sales record. But that really wasn't that much. I believe that was like that sales record, that previous sales record was like $100, and I sold $200 that day. The farm was in rough shape. This was before Ben was the manager. 2015, I did an internship with another farm where I would help them with markets, and he showed me stuff, a couple of things that I would later bring to Old School Farm, stuff like stacking it high, watching it fly, consolidating your product, and I'm sure like a couple other things that I'm just forgetting right now. And so eventually, I started working for Old School. My first week officially working for them, I again broke a sales record by like 33%. I kept breaking the sales. I kept on hitting a new record for like 6 weeks straight. We were joking around that like I was just going to always break the previous record. That would have been nice. But couple weeks into this, I kept on going to Ben with all these ideas on how we would do things a little bit different in the booth. And he just said, John, quit bothering me about it. It's your booth now. Like, whatever you're doing just keeps working. You're paying attention. You know what doesn't work. Just go for it. And so, it just became mine. I went from the first market that I worked with him, like he wanted to come and make sure that like I did things correctly and yada, yada, and within a couple of weeks he was just like, no, it's yours. I just don't, leave me alone about it. So, that was kind of, that was kind of cool. So the way they used to do things, I actually had to look at old pictures, to remind myself on what we used to do in that booth. I know the first thing I did in my capacity of running that market was I got rid of the stool that they were sitting on. I think it was such bad body language. I just felt it. How am I supposed to be sitting, while trying to instigate a conversation or offer a sample to somebody who's walking by? I'm like imagining that now, and I just feel so awkward. You're there on a stool, and you're like, you've got a plate of samples, and you're like, here, try this. Like, get up. You're talking to somebody. You're talking to somebody who's standing. So that was my first thing. No more stool for me. And eventually, we had their CSA pickups in the back of the tent. And I got rid of their stool as well. I just, I didn't tell them either. It was just kind of like, no stool today. And then it just became the normal thing. There wasn't a stool. I didn't make us think about it. The only person I told about it was Ben, in case there was a market I couldn't do. I was like, look, no more stools. Bad body language.
That's one little nuance that, if you're currently sitting in a market, you could easily try, right? For one Saturday or a couple Saturdays, you put the stool away or don't bring the stool, and you try and interact all just off your feet and see if it makes a difference, see how you interact. I mean, one thing I think of just in that, if you're sitting, it's very easy to do nothing, right? And just daydream. If you're standing, it's a lot harder just to kind of stand there and daydream and do nothing. Like, you're going to want to keep yourself busy, and maybe that's cleaning up, maybe that's consolidating, maybe that's refreshing product, it's engaging with customers. So I think just the act of changing your body from a sit to a stand position creates more action beyond standing up.
Oh, exactly. I mean, I believe Ben gets into that too. Like, if you're in the field, right, you do not take a position where you're on your butt, to do whatever you're trying to do. If it's weeding or whatever, it's something I noticed some of our employees, supported employees, do a lot of. They're by a row that they're supposed to be weeding, and they take this position where they're on their rear end. And I talked to our manager. I was like, look, we need to get them some good knee pads. We have some kind of fairly cheap knee pads. It's like, let's do something where, if you're an employee, for 3 months, we're going to get you these really nice DeWalt knee pads that are $25 each. If you want to buy them before then, we'll compensate you at that 3-month mark. But those things, they make you feel like you're kneeling down and crawling around on the cloud. They're awesome. Yeah, when I mentioned that to Ben, he was like, oh yeah, that's something mentioned in the lean farm. It's like, don't sit. It makes you disengage. I'm standing right now talking to you because of that. I'm not going to sit down and talk to you. Get rid of your stools. Yeah, I cringe when I see other booths at the market, with people sitting down, and I'm like, wow, that's just a big thing.
So one thing you could change there, get rid of the stools, and I guess, what type of booth are you standing behind here? Is it product lined up at the front of the stall? Is it a U shape where you're standing at the back of the stall? Have you played around with orientation?
Sure. We've always had our stuff at the front of our booth. We started with a 10x10 canopy tent, and now we have 2 of them. And yeah, tables up front. I'm not a fan of the inside U shape or even the inside L. I think it can create a claustrophobic environment. A lot less so if you have a 20 wide by 10, and you can get a little bit more elbow room, and you're not doing, you can set them up all the way in the back. But even then, I like the tables up front. I share my so-called secrets with all the other booths at the farmers market. People set their tables like maybe a foot or 2 back, and I asked them, I was like, why are you all the way back there? I say things in, just kind of a humorous way, but like, there's just no sense in it. That's 2 feet worth, that's just 2 feet worth of space that, like, I feel like you're missing out on. I have my table all the way up front, and now I can talk to people who are about 10 feet away from my booth and offer them a sample. If you're set just a little bit back, that makes certain people a little bit more awkwardly out of your reach. You're really going to have to yell to get their attention. Your stuff is presented well. People don't have to really go into your booth to see what you got. That's the thing I hate the most about the L shape or the U shape, on the inside. People have to go into your booth in order to in order to see your product.
That can be intimidating. I mean, I always tell people, like, I'm the type of person that you want to set your booth up for, because I'm a little bit like, I'm not as personable as you and Darby and Ray Tyler and other people like that. I tend not to want to engage. So if I can just walk down the aisle and the booth is not deviating I don't have to deviate my path of walking down the aisle to go into the booth, it just makes the transaction easier. So you're not selling to the person that's going to go into the booth and chat you up and just wants to get in there. Like, they're the given. You're selling to the me's who, like, you're trying to convert and say, like, hey, no fear here. We're not going to try and hard sell you. We're going to make it easy. That's how I always look at sales is, look, you're moving the maybes to yeses versus the yeses to bigger yeses. The yeses are already yeses. Forget them. But make it easy for the maybes.
Yeah, yeah. You just reminded me too. It's like I chat up every single customer, right? Well, almost every single customer. I have a lot of regular customers. They come up to the booth. It's kind of like a little nod that we give each other. They get their stuff, they give me their money, and they move on. And it's like I know, I recognize them. They don't want samples. They're not the talkative type, but so they just walk right up to the booth and yeah, they do their thing. So yeah, claustrophobic environments. I think it's killers. Like, especially if you have a 10 by 10, only and you've got three 6 foot by 30-inch tables. You make a little U in there. Only like the most amount of people you're gonna fit in there with you in there also is maybe four, and that's if there's two couples. Like I don't see four single people in there. Even three single people. Like you're bumping into each other. You're all into their personal space. On the other hand, on my booth, like people can be crowded around our lunchbox peppers, and checking those out and rubbing up against each other. But that's okay because they've got a lot of open space behind them. It's not claustrophobic, and people will get in a little bit tighter. And it's not just the open space behind them, but the open space above their head too. Like there's no, they're not closed in. The other thing about the U shape or the L shape is the whole customer kind of flow. I do try and create a flow, and get people to pay, whether it's cash or card. I tell people to pay, on the certain end of the booth, and it's actually where some of our more expensive items are. So I want people to kind of look at those, our bouquets of flowers and maybe, tomatoes.
I mean, one thing I think of too, and this is probably applicable to each individual customer base because some are different, but I've been with stroller for 7 years and I've been with double wide stroller for 5 years here. And I look at those U-Boos, if I got a double wide stroller and I'm like, I'm not going to go in there because I can get in, I get trapped, I got to get out, I got to snowplow my way out. So I'm thinking like if you have a lot of customers that are in wheelchairs with walkers, they have a pull cart to pull all their stuff, or they have a stroller, like if you notice those are your people, are you making it easy for those people to buy? Now, if you get one stroller customer out of 50, I don't know that I'd change my booth around for that. But if you see a lot of them, it is a nuance because as a parent, when you're pushing those things, you think like, I'm not going in there. Like, it's just too much work. I'm going to end up getting somebody's ankle or my kid's going to grab something. It just adds to the stress.
Yeah, amazing point. I never even thought of that. I'm a single guy, and you know what? That's a great point for a lot of our farmers are younger farmers at the farmers market, and they're not thinking of that either. Let me badmouth the U shape a little bit more, if you don't mind. If you haven't been convinced yet, so where's your cash box in that? Again, the customer flow. You're in that type place, and cash boxes have been stolen before. They need to be set back somewhere. How are you? And well, how are you going to, harass passerbys with samples and telling them to come on in and, check out your stuff. If you're set in that U shape, and people are walking by your booth all the time and you're not talking to them, you're manning a register probably all the way in the back of the booth, or you can stand outside, if you've got a partner, stand outside the booth with samples. But I don't like that. Like, that's just kind of, it feels a little bit too hustlerish. It's like, I don't know. I think it's awkward.
Yeah, I mean, like sometimes I watch this like great food truck race, and one of the strategies they have on it is they get like the most loud person to stand outside the food truck and just like nag every person that goes by to say, come buy something, essentially begging. And I think that's the wrong side of things. And it is one of the challenges though you'd have to overcome with the U shape is one person at the back. I mean, you're yelling up to the front of the booth to somebody, or you have to have that other person out there just doing the selling for you versus if product is front, product is on display, that's attracting attention. You can then observe the people who are looking at the product and make responses based off that versus trying to sell somebody who might not even be able to see what you're offering at the first place. Because again, I mean, I think of those people at the front of the booth and I'm thinking, okay, like they want to give me a massage or they want to sell me, a back alignment or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. So I think, another nice thing about that too is that whole barrier of the table in between you and the person you're talking to. I think there's a comfort to that too. Like if I'm standing there, with just a plate in my hand and, I'm trying to sell you all this produce that I'm standing in front of, it just feels weird. I actually feel kind of exposed, and you said I'm a people person and I really am, but like that moment just feels awkward to me. It feels a lot better to be standing behind that booth. And, there's this barrier, enforcing our personal space. They can get really close to the product and I can talk to them, while still feeling very comfortable.
Well, and also thinking of standing behind the table interacting. I mean, you look at, I'll say professional sellers, like people at fairs that do demos or people that go to Costco and do demos of Vitamix. I mean, it's always their interaction is they're behind a booth with the stuff in front of them, with the people looking at them. It's like the kind of teaching lineup that we're all used to. And it makes it easy if you're behind to then, without you having to move a whole lot, point and reference things in front of you where I see what you're saying. If you're standing up at the front of the booth, the product's behind you. Oh, check out our peppers. I mean, you're trying to turn your body now. Now you're not facing them and say, oh, come back here. They're back here. That's a challenge. Now, one thing I can think that people are saying is if you have a 10 by 10 booth, if you go a U shape, you essentially have, let's say, 30 feet of booth, linear feet of booth space. That's a lot of space to put product on. If you just go across the front, it's 10. What would you say to somebody who's like, I can't fit it all on one table across the front and I can't get another stall right now?
If you can't afford a wider space, you're probably not selling that much stuff anyway. Like it's so worth the investment. I mean, we're talking about $200 on the tent. Our market sells us, now our particular market only charges us an extra $15 a week, to do it. But let's say, let me backtrack a little bit and go over, whether or not you really need to go double wide too. Cause there's the whole stack it high thing. How are you putting out your product? Because needing that much space. Well, first of all, if you put three tables, which is all you can really fit in there, you only have 18 feet. And I am asking you to squeeze it down to about 10, maybe 8. So you have a way to get in and out of your booth easily without stepping into the next farmer's booth. The whole stack it high and watch it fly, mentality, I think has really, really helped us. Our shelving, we only went to double wide this year. And last year we started doing shelving. We started bringing crates, and I've stacked those crates 3 high. I would go vertical before I go horizontal. Just invest in some good shelving or crates. I'm a big fan of there are these little, they look like onion crates, or they look like there's these nicer crates you can get at Hobby Lobby, and they're $8 a piece, and they look great, especially if you want to take some time and stain them, that'd be even better. I've seen other farmers do that, and I think their crates look better than ours. We really need to work on our shelving, because we have like old onion or bean boxes or something like that. They're really kind of falling apart, but we make it work. Go vertical. Yeah, absolutely. Just I would say that. Do not spread your stuff out. I have a hard time believing that. I don't see too many people that at the farmers market that I'm at that can't start going vertical. I've got a friend that I'm thinking of in particular, and he's got the U-shaped model, and it's just crammed in there. And he's got shelving, but he's got, rather than shelving where you can stack, how do I explain this? He doesn't have crate kind of shelving. He's got like pieces of wood that in the back of the table that he puts a tablecloth over. So there's 2 levels. So it's not really shelving. It's just multi-level. And he can pack that stuff up a lot tighter if he wanted to. If he got his hands on some crates, he can probably swing one of those tables, put it out front, and stack it ridiculously high, and go from there. And also, you could put. I like to squeeze all of my product out on display at the market. It's kind of a lean thing. Like I want to touch my totes once and get stuff out, and now I just move. I'm moving stuff. I'm not opening and closing totes throughout the market. I get everything out there. Like I've run out of space a couple of times, and rather than putting stuff to the side and I'll restock later, I created one more table out of our transport totes. Like I stacked them all up, put a tablecloth out of them, made a tablecloth out of them, and stuck them in front of the other tables. Fortunately we have a corner space, and I've just made extra table just to stack stuff out there. Your market manager usually doesn't complain too much if you have like a little table in front of your booth for like one special thing. So yeah, that's what I have to say about that. Go vertical. And if you're running out of room going vertical, then you can probably, at that point, you probably should be able to afford the extra market booth.
Thinking of these setups now, and going to the pitch, going to samples, how do you engage new customers, and how are you offering samples, and like what types of samples are you giving? Is this a piece of lettuce? Is this a cut tomato? What is it?
It's multiple things. I actually sample the thing I really want to move. Or maybe, because I have a lot of it. Or maybe it's not that great of a seller. So if you come within 8-ish feet of my booth, I'm going to offer you a sample, whether we've made eye contact or not.
And how do you offer it? I'm walking by, I'm 8 feet away. What's the call out I'm going to hear?
I'll give you the coffee version. Have you had your greens yet this morning? They do go great with coffee. I usually get a laugh out of that one. But yeah, have you had your greens yet this morning? Would you like to try some baby squash? Like to try a carrot? Would you like to try, cherry tomato? It's yeah, yeah. I usually like to say I like to say what what they're in for.
See, I like the coffee line because like that's something that is memorable in a world that is like, try this. Like it's easy to forget that stuff, but like I'm gonna remember that coffee line by the time this airs, which is going to be months from now. And so I think that those types of little nuances, they help and they all stack up.
Yeah, I think I probably came up with that too because I would offer samples and people would wave their coffee at me and say no thank you, and they still say no thank you, but that doesn't, I think it matters less. They don't all say no thank you though. A lot of people like some greens with their coffee. But yeah, have you had your greens yet this morning too? Also kind of bypasses I've already had breakfast. Well, that's not an issue. Have you had your greens yet this morning? I'm very willing to have a lot of fun, poke a little fun too. Like, oh, I'm chewing gum. And I was like, what, I'll ask them like, why'd you do that before you came to a farmer's market? You got to try stuff, give them a little bit of a hard time. And it's a lot of fun, people, I don't think I've offended, anybody, just with a little good-natured rib like that. And I'm willing to make fun of myself too. Obviously, they go great with coffee is a lie, and I'm acting like a bit of a salesman, but I don't know. It seems to really work for me. I've gotten a lot of compliments from customers on my salesmanship, and other nearby booths. Like, yeah, you can be too obnoxious, and I've had people in my booth working with me that have made me cringe. I don't like the best lettuce in all of Nashville, and I'm like, I don't like that because that does feel like shoddy. I don't know. It rubs me the wrong way.
Yeah, it's like what they call brag and boast marketing. You're just making up some claim, best carrot, healthiest food, cures cancer, whatever this stuff is. People just make up. It's puffery, and you think on the samples. Some markets allow it, some markets don't. Some people do it, some people don't. For you, how do you think samples translate into sales?
Oh, I mean, I think it's just been so key, especially because it's the conversation starter. It gets them close. It allows me to do, I think, with a new customer, somebody who's never shopped with us before. I think what samples do is get people in, so I can do the most important thing, for getting ongoing, reliable, dedicated customers, and doing something to translate to sales. So it's not the sample. I don't sample and get sales. I think, well, I probably do, but I think the most important thing actually is having a story. All right. I think when people go to a farmer's market, yes, they're shopping for quality, local, organically grown produce that's fresh. Yes, people are looking for all of those things, but what they're really shopping for is an interaction with the farmer and a story, a relationship and a story. So when people come in for the sample, I'm like, have you shopped with us before? If I kind of recognize them, but I'm not sure, I ask them, do you remember how we price things? And if they say, no, we've never shopped with you before, I was like, well, my response is, well, then I have to give you the speech. And the speech is, Old School Farm is a nonprofit organization with the mission of hiring people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. We provide them a means of employment. We teach them job skills. We use all organic practices to grow our stuff. All right. That sounds like a mouthful, and it can be. And I usually I'm reading body language as I'm saying something like that, and I'll cut it short. Old School Farm's a nonprofit with the mission of hiring people with intellectual disabilities, and we use all organic practices to grow our stuff. It really becomes a mouthful because at the end of that, I tell people prices.
So you give the pitch or this is who we are, and then is it this is who we are? You silence, shut up, and then see what they say.
So I'll do the real version. Okay. Old School Farms.
I just walked up to the booth.
Yeah. Have you shopped with us before?
No, I've never been here before.
Oh, okay. Well, you've never been to this market before?
No, I live in the area or just moved into the area, so first time here at the market.
Awesome. Where have you been? Welcome to Richland Park Farmers Market. We run all year long, so we're here every Saturday. Our farm is Old School Farm. Old School Farm is a nonprofit organization with the mission of hiring people with intellectual and developmental disabilities to work on the farm. We use all organic practices to grow our stuff, and all the veggies you see on the table here are $3 each or 4 for $10. Mix and match.
Okay, right on. Okay, cool. So then you let them, they know that you've communicated who you are, what the pricing is. Now I look around and, I can check it out. You can kind of step back at that point, let them go, I'm assuming, and then just answer questions as needed.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe I noticed something about you and about, I don't know, you've got your stroller, and you've got one of your daughters with you. Is she hungry today? Would she like to try would she like to try some greens? Would she like to try a little piece of carrot?
Going back to what I asked, do samples sell? And I think maybe I asked that the wrong way because I don't know that a sample directly leads to a sale. In this case, I mean, it might. It's hard to track because somebody might say, they eat the pepper and say, oh, give me a pint of those. But the sample kind of fills a role within the sales funnel. The goal of the sample is to get them to stop, engage, try the sample, and then come to the next part. It's not to go from sample to cash register. It's to go from sample to talking to you. You communicate something, they look around. So each little piece moves them further down the funnel.
Yeah, exactly. And also if you're hanging out for a while, do you have any questions about anything? I would say our story and then other kinds of engagement. Do you have any questions about anything?
Well, thinking of that, questions that customers have had, have you been able to reduce certain questions being asked by display, signage, or addressing that early in the pitch, like, putting the pricing up there at the end of the pitch? It maybe prevents them from saying, oh, what's the price of all this stuff? But can you think of any examples of that, or has that ever been a problem?
I went crazy with my signage this year, and I believe I heard it said, if you've heard the question 3 times, you need a sign. I do have our signs. I laminated, just pieces of paper with, signs and have a magnetic strip, and they go on the legs of our tent. And I'll say that that's not been very successful. Especially for our pricing. I think the pricing needs to go with the product. So, I think signage, also there's some sort of, I think signage can be an aid to answer questions too. So people ask where we are, and I actually made a map of the of Nashville, or West Nashville, because we're only like 10 minutes away from the market. So I've got a really close up match with like street and highways that people will recognize, and it shows them where we're at. So yeah, I think signage helps. I think signage needs to be by your produce. I don't think the leg thing that we tried worked. People just walk right past it. That's not what they're looking at. Their eyes are on the food. So, yeah, it's it only, it helps a bit, but not a whole lot. Because people just don't look at it. And I think that's okay.
What about the product itself? Like, so you got, I forget exactly what you said. Let's say, 1 for 3, 2 for 5. Let's assume that's what it is. Do you have that with the product in those categories? And then do you have a sign that says, like, this is mescaline mix, these are tomatoes, these are lunchbox peppers?
So yeah, so here's our product signage. Everything's about, is it 3x5? It fits in a little 3x5 index card holder, all our signs. So yeah, we've got 3x5 signs. Something I worked on last winter is I made those product names as big as possible fitting into that. I did it in Excel, and I increased the font as much as I could on each side. So okra has bigger letters than cherry tomatoes. Aiming for, I want people to see, to be able to read that sign from, 5-10 feet away, depending on their vision, of course. I don't, I just want that out there. Something I would like to improve with our signage. Actually, I think I'd like 2 3x5 cards and squeeze them on the same sign holder. And in the next 3x5 card, might have the varieties we grow and suggestions, on what you can do with it. So, fairy tale eggplant. I've explained so much. Are you familiar with fairy tale eggplant? They're little bigger than finger size eggplants. Really tiny, purple, look gorgeous. So we, people are, what do you do? What do you do with those? Those are my favorite eggplants because I'm a very lazy cook. All right. A lot of people slice them in half. I don't even bother doing that. I wash them whole, put them on my roasting pan, cover them with oil, salt, and herbs and spices, and roast them for 25 minutes at 375 or until they're really mushy. I like my eggplants mushy, and I just eat them in 2 bites. Well, if I could convey a lot of that information on the card, I think that'd be nice. That'd be great for, especially like the introvert that won't ask that question. I don't mind actually talking a little stuff like that because I think I don't see that as invaluable. Not invaluable. I don't see that as wasted time. Like, oh, this question again. I wish they would just read the sign. That's actually a little bit more of that interaction that customer's looking for. That I think is way more valuable if we have that communication rather than them reading the sign. And also me saying that kind of thing out loud, I project a lot. And if somebody's close by, I'll actually position myself to the customer I'm talking to where in a way where my line of sight is also catching somebody else close by so they hear it too. So I'm trying to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. I'm trying to sell to 2 people rather than 1, even though, the other person didn't really ask the question. Now they know as well. I do that with my spiel as well, too. If multiple customers come up to me at once, I make sure all the customers hear the story. Even if it's like somebody like I recognize and they know, it's kind of a nice reminder.
Yeah, I mean, signage is one of those things I think about, and I do see a lot of booths that have poor signage, and I look at that next to standing up. Like, it's so easy to change. There's no cost in it in the grand scheme of things, and anyone can do it. I mean, if you can't write well, you can print it, and you can experiment with so many ideas each year and try something new each week very easily, because I mean, they don't take a ton of time, especially, if people use this time in the off season to work on these things.
The signs we made this year did take me actually quite a bit of time. Our manager was kind of like, you're still working on that? And, cause I before I printed out, I don't know, however many, 20 sheets of paper, laminated them all, and, and all of that, I would run trials, about, with this and that, because I got pushed a little bit too on how much time I was taking. Like, we have a very boring font. Like, I think we're just using Helvetica. I took some time a couple of weeks ago too, like just playing around with different fonts. I forget which one I decided on. It's in my document though. I'm like, oh yeah, I got to turn everything to this, some other calligraphy font. You don't want it too fancy. They have to be able to read it. And yeah, I have very poor handwriting. There's something we had going into this. We just had blank laminated cards and we were writing everything. And I see a lot of people doing that. They have laminated signage and they just write it every week, and they try and have it. They've got this beautiful looking handwriting and everything like that. But I'm just like, no, it's I'm sorry. It's so hard to read. I guess it's easy to read too because they've got their U-shaped thing, and you're up close to the product anyway, so then you can read it. But I think you want it simple. You want it, bold text that anybody can read from 10 feet away. If you can read stuff from, if you can read things that are letters that are 3 inches big from 10 feet away, which I don't actually think there's too many people that can't do that.
Well, you just don't want people searching for too long, because there is this idea of like, you can't see what it is or how much it is. You just like, screw it. Like, this is a pain. I'm walking away.
Here's another thing also about that sign too, about our signage is what's nice about pre-packing stuff with our pricing system is we don't have to squeeze the price on each product. It's garlic. That's all our sign says. Maybe I'll put something next to it, like I said, that says, that gives ideas on what you can do with garlic, which I actually have had to explain garlic to people. But that's a education opportunity, and a lot of people appreciate that.
So on something like garlic, that's in a bag or a little clamshell so it can be unitized, or do you have it like, it's a elephant garlic and one head of garlic is $1 or something?
Elephant garlic, we would probably sell that by the each. We sell medium-sized garlic, and that's one of the few things we actually bring loose, and they're 2 for $3. What else? I forget what else we bring loose. But yeah, garlic is 2 for $3. There's other items too that are 2 for $3. We put that sign up, and a lot of people usually understand too with our pricing scheme. Like, well, if I get these 2 garlic and 3 other items, that means I'm getting 4 for $10. And yes, that is what that means.
So clear pricing, clear signage on what the items are, suggested usage, you have good body language, you're engaging the customer. At that point, does that take care of 90% of what's happening at the booth, or are there other things that really you think make a difference?
Yeah, I'm thinking, yeah, first and foremost is that customer engagement. That's really what they're shopping for. I can't emphasize that enough. It's like, I dare say it's more than the product. I learned, that was really reinforced with, I forget, there's this woman that runs, a Facebook group, CSA, farmer discussion. She's got a lot of really valuable information that she could be selling. She's putting it out there for free. And her farm does a 400-member CSA. She talks about how to maintain, her recurring membership rate's ridiculous. If I remember correctly, it's something like 80%. And she tells you how to get that kind of customer. But anyway, something she taught me is like, look, farmers market customers, but especially CSA customers, they're not buying produce. They're buying a relationship with their farmer. Especially the CSA member. They're special people. Farmers market, CSA people especially, but farmers market people are generally, the regulars are very unique people. All right. They're different. They're not going to Whole Foods. They think differently about food and a lot of other things in life. And they're coming to the farmers market because they want to be part of that community. They want to, this is a little thing that happens and it's special and it's different. It's way different than, buying their stuff at we're not trying to emulate a grocery store experience, like at all. I mean, there's certain things we can learn from the grocery store, but we're not trying to emulate that. Like, this is different. The farmers market's a community. It's an event. It's, I view it as a production. It really is this production that's going on and the special thing that happens once a week. And we've got, load in, and then we have the show, and then we have load out. And yeah, you got to you got to do your act, which is your spiel, and you're interacting with customers. I had a great, assistant at market this year. It really, I think I credit him for a lot of the success in sales we've had, because, something I've experienced when I'm by myself trying to hustle these vegetables with our price points and everything that I do, I feel like my max is somewhere about, I can do somewhere between $800 and $1,000, and then like at the end of that day, I'm done. And as much of a people person and outgoing I am, at the end of 3.5 hours of doing that, I want to go home and not talk to anybody for a while. And, I remember telling my manager after a really successful market once, I think it was like we did 900 plus. And I was like, that's it, man. I told Ben, the manager, dude, if you want to sell more than this, I need somebody else here. Cause I'm like, I really gave it my all. I remember that market. Like, I actually pre-cooked a bunch of the fairy tale eggplant, and I was sampling that because we had a bumper crop, and I had like 40 units to sell or 50 units to sell. And, having to explain what I did with that, to cook it. And it was a really successful market for us. But at the end of it, I was just like, I don't think I could have sold more if we had more product and more customers. Like, I realized my limit, what my limit was. And it was something like, like I said, 800 to 1,000, maybe 900 something dollars.
Yeah, and one thing we really need to talk on here, because somebody could hear this and say, well, these are all strategies, that's great. Price is a big factor. When you look at your booth, your product, your pricing, where are you guys in the pricing hierarchy versus other competitors selling similar stuff?
We are not the cheapest people at the market. I actually had kind of an incident where I probably overreacted. I went around to the other booths. There's a customer complained that we were selling our pints of tomatoes for $6. Somebody came back to us, and they're like, they're selling theirs over there for $3. And I'm like, so my reaction to that kind of question, first of all, is I don't know how they do it. I don't know how they sell their product. I don't know how they sell that at that price. I'll talk to them later and ask for tips. Tell the customer this. And it was like, but I don't know how they do that. And yeah, with all the labor involved that goes into making this. Because we successfully, in the 2 years we were at that particular market, we never lowered our price for a pint of cherry tomatoes below $5, and we sold it all. And I feel like we're one of the more expensive producers at that market, but I think between our sales strategies and also the pricing scheme we have, it's all very, we do well. I've been in, I don't know if I said this already. If I said this to you off air before, we're usually the number one booth at the market we're at, sales wise. And, I'm unabashedly more, we're more expensive. And I encourage a lot of the other farmers, like, look, you should raise your price on that. And some of them listen. I've had one scoff at me. Oh, that's stupid. You're ripping your customers off. And I'm like, we're making a living. We got to make a living here. Well, and the same person was like, well, Kroger sells their stuff for this. And at that point, I was just like, oh, this is a much bigger conversation. We can't, you're not a supermarket. We cannot compete at a supermarket. Our clientele is not looking for supermarket prices. Very few of them are.
So high priced or relatively high priced. You're not the cheapest at the market. That's an important point. And then if you think about, over the years, you've gone from $300 in sales to $1,000 and $1,000 plus weeks in sales. The other thing that could come into play here is, do you think that market's seeing the same volume? Like, are you guys just now attracting more existing customers into the booth that you weren't before, or has the market itself grown?
I'm sorry, something just popped up in my head because we went down I diverted. When talking, I was talking about the production aspect of it before. My assistant was an introvert that turned his extrovertness. Yeah, sure, that's a word. He turned into I asked him to turn into an extrovert at the market, and he did it. So, you can do it too. I just want to say that very quickly. Just turn it on, pretend you're an extrovert for about 3 hours. And yeah, because that's showtime. All right. So, recurring customers. What about recurring customers again?
Well, it was just making the case of, did sales go up because the market now sees more customers, or did sales go up because the number of customers at the market really hasn't changed? You're just getting more of those customers to stop at your booth.
I believe the market we're in has happened to, they've increased. The amount of customers has definitely increased. One of the big local papers, the market was rated as, by one of the editors, it wasn't, but as the best farmers market in, in all of Nashville. And it's also kind of like a hidden gem. They said, like, they were kind of saying, like, this market should be busier, actually, because of how awesome it is, what we have variety-wise. Oh, and we did. So I'm also comparing sales from two different markets. We were in a midweek market before I got there. They were at, the farm was averaging 250 a market with a high of 300 in sales. That market was like slowly dying while this one was on the uptick. So that was kind of important. That was kind of a big deal. I actually had to sell the manager on going back to doing this Saturday market, because I was talking to all the vendors, which is a big important thing. It's a community. Talk to your other vendors and get your thumb on the pulse of what's going on, what market's great, what market's not. I know which markets to avoid because of the experience of others. And yeah, we got into this market because I was talking to other vendors and they were telling me, like, no, this is a good market to be at.
One of the other big things that has affected how you operate at the market is making things more efficient, leaning them out. Can you talk about some of the changes that you've put in place there?
We've tried to apply lean principles to the farmers market and the farmers market interaction. I've explained what I do to another friend of mine who's doing lean farming on his farm, but he's very resistant to a lot of what we've incorporated at our place, because he thinks we're wasting time by prepackaging. That's value. That's labor, and it's labor that the customer can be doing, and actually we're making our transactions too fast too. I talk about that. I'm like, look, the customer doesn't have to pick their peppers and do this and that. But I don't think the customer values having to select. They do to a certain extent, but we are taking that away from them, but we're also freeing up their time, and we're freeing up the choices they have to make. The idea that we want to slow down this interaction, I get that. I want to slow down the interaction too, but I want their time spent at the booth interacting with me, not picking vegetables, not me weighing vegetables too. That's another thing. That's an awkward moment when I'm trying to weigh each item they have, plug it into the price into the scale, and either using a piece of paper or a calculator or trying to memorize like what I've all these product prices. It's just kind of, that's not a valuable moment for either one of us. I'd rather, just make that simple so I can do all of the, flirting and interacting that I like to do. We eliminate valuable time and replace it with quality time. I put the plastic bags, our shopping bags, in the front with them. So I'm not bagging stuff. They're bagging their own stuff. I remind people to do that. I'm like, oh, grab a bag, fill it up. Well, don't you want a seat? Nope. Just tell me how many things you have. We don't deal with coins. I'm not trying to make that kind of change. Sometimes I refuse that last dollar that they're trying to put together with dimes and nickels. I'm just like, forget about it. I don't want it. And, So we're freeing up actually a lot of time to, like I said, to chit chat. So, we make the process like easy and frankly a little brainless. It's, people only have so many choices to make throughout the day, and I've heard other people talk about being overwhelmed with having to make a bunch of choices. If you bring too many grains, too many varieties of tomatoes, too many varieties of peppers, people are just overwhelmed by selection and they just get frustrated and walk away. 4 for 10. Okay, I have to pick 4 things. It's not, I don't have to pick these peppers and this and that. It's, there's a freedom in it, even though you're taking away some choices. So think about your interaction, like the customer process from start to finish, and what kind of time you can eliminate, and I think that translates to great sales. The overwhelming majority of my transactions are $14. Are $10. They do the 4 for 10 thing, and usually a little bit higher. $10, $16, $20, and $6 in that order. That's what I think. I'd have to look over it again, but I'm almost positive that that's what our transactions look like. We do use Square. I don't track my transactions with Square. I only use Square for credit cards because we've gotten things so easy. People just they usually hand us the right amount of cash, like immediately. We only have to deal with so many different transaction numbers. Our sales are $3, $6, $10, $13, $16, or $20. Nobody ever buys 3 things. I don't let people buy 3 things. I was like, 3 things are $9. We have 4 for 10. And they blink and they're like, well, I'll get 4 for 10 then. We might technically lose money on that, but I think we also create a moment there where the customer realizes that, hey, they just got a deal, and this person's, looking out for me.
Yeah, I love the idea of that. Simplifying things, communicating clearly, engaging with customers and interacting. I mean, all some of the base principles in this one. A lot of advice that people can put into play in their market booth. Thanks for taking the time to chat today, John. Appreciate it. There you have it, Farmer John Smita. I want to thank John for coming on the show today and talking about his experience running their farmers market booth. There was a lot of real common sense things in this one, things like signage, clear pricing, and how to deal with customers. But like most common sense things, oftentimes they get overlooked or they aren't done. So I hope these little tips help. These are things that can be done on any farm, whether that's livestock or veg. Given that, I hope they help you on your farm this season. If you've had a lot of growth in your farmers market sales, I'd love to maybe have a chat for a future podcast where you can share tips, tricks, techniques that you've used to grow your farmers market sales. If you've done that and you'd like to chat about that, hit me up on Instagram at Diego Footer and we can get that conversation started. As we roll into farmers market season here, best of luck with your booth this year. I hope you have a lot of success and I hope you have a lot of fun with it all. Also, take note that today marks the last brand new episode of the 2018-2019 season of Grass-Fed Life. We'll continue to have new episodes coming out for Grass-Fed Life Insiders, which you can learn more about at grassfedlife.co/insider. Each month, for the rest of the year, insiders are going to get a new podcast episode, but they won't be aired on this feed. I will be running some replays over the next few months, and then I'll be back in the fall with some new episodes all about raising livestock profitably on pasture. Thanks for everybody who's participated in creating episodes for the 2018-2019 season, and thanks for everybody who's listened to all the episodes that we've done. I hope you have a great, fun, and enjoyable summer. I'll talk to you again in the fall. Until then, be nice, be thankful, and do the work.